Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to unpack the massive, ticking clock of India's demographics and figure out exactly what it means for the future of the global economy. Now, if you've been following global trends, you already know India is a rising powerhouse. But today, we're zooming in on the actual engine driving that rise. It's people. We're going to go way beyond the basic headlines and look at the structural shifts happening right now on the ground, which are creating an absolute once-in-a-generation window of opportunity. All right, let's map out our journey really quick. We'll be hitting 6 key pillars today. 1, the scale. 2, the superpower. 3, 2 Indias. 4, urban migration. 5, cultural tapestry. And finally, 6, the ticking clock. So let's dive right into section 1, the scale. Look, you simply cannot understand India's economic potential or its developmental hurdles for that matter without first grasping the sheer mind-boggling magnitude, 1.476 billion people. It's almost hard to even wrap your head around that number, right? That means literally almost 1 out of every 6 human beings on planet Earth lives in India. It is officially the most populous country in the world, and they're living in a space that creates a high population density of 497 persons per square kilometer. Now, this incredible mass of humanity is obviously a tremendous national resource. It's a vast labor force and an immense consumer market, but it's also a staggering developmental challenge when it comes to figuring out housing, infrastructure, and basic natural resources. But here is where we get a really fascinating paradox. When we hear most populous country, we naturally just assume explosive, unchecked population growth. But actually, India's fertility rate has dropped to 1.9 births per woman. That is below the 2.1 replacement level, which is the rate you need for a generation to just naturally replace itself. This historic decline is the direct result of rising female education, rapid urbanization, delayed marriages, and just way better access to family planning. Basically, families are fundamentally changing how they plan for their futures. And this falling fertility rate, it's paired with some seriously remarkable improvements in public health. Over the last few decades, incredible strides in medical technology, sanitation, and disease control have pushed overall life expectancy up to 72.7 years, with women living on average to 74.4 years. But even more crucially, infant mortality has dropped to just 21 per 1,000 live births. These aren't just dry statistics on a chart. They represent millions of families experiencing longer, healthier lives, which completely changes the entire demographic structure of the nation. So, you might be wondering, if the fertility rate is below replacement level, why on earth is the population still growing? Well, it comes down to a concept called population momentum. It's kind of like a speeding train. Even when you hit the brakes, it takes a while to actually stop. Because India had such high growth in the late 20th century, we're talking over 2% annually, there is an absolutely massive base of young people who are just now entering their reproductive years. So even though they are having fewer children per family, the sheer number of families means the population is still growing by about 12.6 million people a year. It's projected to finally peak around 1.7 billion around the year 2062 before it stabilizes and eventually declines. Moving right along to section 2. The superpower. So, the absolutely crucial point here is this concept of the demographic dividend. This is an incredibly powerful but temporary phase in a nation's development. Right now, India has roughly 47 dependents, meaning children and the elderly, for every 100 working-age individuals. When you have way fewer dependents relying on each working adult, household savings skyrocket, government revenues increase, and you get this massive surge in investment and rapid economic expansion. It's basically an economic sweet spot. This is the exact same phase that previously propelled post-war Japan and later China to global prominence. And this translates into an absolute superpower on the global stage. Look at that median age, just 29.2 years. That makes India one of the youngest major economies in the world. Compare that to the aging populations of its global peers. China's median age is sitting around 40, Europe is way up above 44, Japan is near 49. While other major economies are seriously stressing out about shrinking workforces and skyrocketing pension costs, India is just brimming with youth, and that inherently implies greater innovation potential and long-term economic vitality. Breaking that down even further, this translates to a massive 68% of India's population falling straight into the working age bracket of 15 to 64 years old. That represents the largest potential workforce in the entire world. It's a huge dual threat advantage. You have hundreds of millions of people ready to produce goods and services, and at the exact same time, you have hundreds of millions of newly employed young people ready to spend, which drives unparalleled domestic consumer demand.
But of course, it's not perfectly uniform, which brings us to Section 3, two Indias.
As with literally everything involving 1.4 billion people, the story changes depending on where you look. We're actually dealing with two totally contrasting demographic realities. On one hand, you have the southern and western states. Due to earlier successes in literacy and healthcare, their fertility is incredibly low, around 1.5. Their populations are actually aging, they're starting to face labor shortages, and their policy priority is shifting heavily toward elderly care. But on the flip side, the northern and eastern states are a completely different ballgame. They have higher fertility rates, booming youth populations, and an expanding workforce. Their immediate, burning priority is generating millions of jobs and building schools. It is a crazy complex balancing act for a single national government to manage two entirely different demographic timelines at the exact same time. And that regional imbalance perfectly tees up Section 4, urban migration. This profound regional shift naturally fuels one of the largest urban transformations in human history. I mean, when jobs are in one place and young people are in another, people move. Driven by industrialization and the search for better wages, a staggering 37.6% of Indians now live in urban areas. Now, 37.6% might sound a bit low compared to fully developed nations, but in absolute numbers, that is over 550 million urban residents. Entire populations of massive countries are essentially being added to India's urban landscape as millions migrate from rural agricultural areas to cities looking for upward mobility.
And they're moving to absolute megacities. Look at Delhi. Delhi alone now exceeds 30 million residents. 30 million! Cities like Mumbai, Bengaluru, and Hyderabad are incredible engines of the modern economy. They function as global hubs for finance, tech, manufacturing, and innovation. But this ultra-rapid urbanization obviously comes at a huge cost. It massively intensifies the pressures on housing, causes severe traffic congestion, totally strains waste management, and leads to critical water scarcity. Building the infrastructure to support these mega agglomerations is definitely one of the state's biggest ongoing battles.
Let's shift gears slightly and look at Section 5, cultural tapestry. Because beyond just geography and sheer numbers, we have to look at the extraordinary sociocultural fabric that makes up this vast workforce. India is home to virtually every major world religion. And while it is a Hindu-majority country at roughly 79%, the minority populations are absolutely massive in absolute terms. For example, that 14.5% Muslim population equates to over 200 million people. Let that sink in. That makes it one of the largest Muslim populations anywhere on the globe. This kind of religious diversity shapes the country's cultural traditions, its educational institutions, its festivals, and the very way public policy is debated and implemented.
And linguistically, it is just as complex. The Indian Constitution actually recognizes 22 scheduled languages, and crucially, there is no single constitutionally designated national language. The linguistic map is broadly divided into two major families. The Indo-Aryan languages, like Hindi and Bengali, spoken largely in the north, west, and east by about 78% of the population, and the Dravidian languages, like Tamil and Telugu, spoken by about 20% primarily down in the south. This linguistic diversity means the workforce is incredibly culturally rich, but it also requires super nuanced, localized approaches to education and business.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the ticking clock. All of these elements, the immense scale, the booming youth, the rapid migration, the deep diversity, bring us to a critical balancing act. The opportunities here are staggering. With the largest potential workforce in the world, India literally has the capacity to become a dominant global production powerhouse and a leading knowledge economy. But these opportunities are directly mirrored by severe challenges. The absolute most pressing one, job creation. Having a massive workforce is only a dividend if those people actually have productive work. If they don't, that same demographic advantage can rapidly turn into a demographic disaster, creating immense social stress, skyrocketing unemployment, and making regional inequality so much worse. So how does India ensure this story has a positive outcome? Well, to succeed over the next 2 to 3 decades, before the population inevitably begins to age, India has to rapidly execute on these 4 core developmental steps. First, generating productive employment at an absolutely unprecedented scale. Second, massively strengthening primary education and healthcare to ensure a capable populace. Third, expanding urban and transport infrastructure to support a modernizing economy. And fourth, equipping its youth not just with basic education, but with the modern, high-tech skills required in today's rapidly shifting global economy. The demographic dividend is an incredible gift, for sure, but it comes with a very strict expiration date. So I leave you with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Will India successfully execute on these monumental challenges and harness this unprecedented youth advantage to propel itself to global economic dominance? Or will the demographic clock run out, closing the window on its greatest strategic asset? It is, without a doubt, one of the most important economic storylines of our lifetime. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep exploring.